Okay.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the New America Foundation. I'm Peter Bergen. I run the National Security Program here. It's with a lot of pleasure that we get to welcome Mike Allen to talk about his excellent new book, Blinking Red. Mike has had a distinguished career, most recently in the government as Chief of Staff to Mike Rogers on the House Intelligence Committee. He also spent 7 years in various senior positions at the National Security Council in the George W. Bush administration. He managed to write a book and have 2 young sons and set up a very successful new business, Beacon Strategies, all in the space, and continuing working on the Hill at the same time. So very impressive, all those different things to do those simultaneously. Mike has agreed to speak about the big themes and stories in his book for about half an hour, and I'll engage him in Q&A and then throw it open to your questions. Mike.
Very good, thank you. I think I'll go to the podium if that's okay.
I think you can do without that. Yeah, see.
I want to thank the New America Foundation for having me today, especially Peter for the invitation, and thank you all for coming out in the rain to hear a little bit about my book, Blinking Red, and I look forward to Q&A about other pressing intelligence community topics. Blinking Red is an attempt to write the authoritative, objective history of the most substantial restructuring of the U.S. intelligence community since its foundations in 1947. The aim in 1947, of course, was to create a central intelligence agency that would, and this sounds familiar to many of you who've studied 9/11, but to make sure that pockets of the U.S. government did not have information that, if shared with other entities of the government, might foretell of a particular attack or national security threat on the United States. The National Security Act, of course, also created the National Security Council and the Defense Department. But the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency really laid the foundations for the modern American intelligence community. The fault of the National Security Act of 1947 was that it seemed to give the Central Intelligence Agency many responsibilities for coordinating the variety of intelligence entities across the federal government, but not enough authority to do the job. So let me break that down for you just if I could. The CIA is, of course, famous for 2 missions you're all very familiar with: covert action and the recruitment of spies around the world. The Security Act of 47 also sought to make the CIA director give him another mission, which was to manage the community, to be the DCI, and to coordinate the growing infrastructure of intelligence agencies that had begun to grow up around World War II. As you approach through the Cold War years, a variety of task forces and commissions noted that the underlying ability of the Director of Central Intelligence to coordinate, for example, the SIGINT, the Signals Intelligence entities in the Department of Defense, was very weak. Literally, dozens of commissions and foundations recommended augmenting the Director of Central Intelligence's power so that they would be able to keep up with the increasing complexity, billions of dollars being spent in American intelligence, and to be able to better face down the Soviet Union. None of these recommendations, none of these attempts to reform or centralize greater authority in a Director of Central Intelligence went anywhere until 2004. There were several factors, which I go through in Blinking Red, that contributed to this major juggernaut of activity, which rewrote one of the most famous pieces of legislation in American history in 4.5 months. There were a variety of things going on that summer. I want to take you back a little bit. I think you'll remember these very well. At the time, the Central Intelligence Agency had really taken a beating. They had been through grueling hearings before Congress about who should be blamed for 9/11 and whether the CIA had failed to watch list certain individuals and had otherwise failed to share information with the FBI that might have foretold of or allowed the FBI to investigate the plots on 9/11. The CIA, I think it's fair to say, was really buffeted by these particular hearings, and then the 9/11 Commission came along and had another set of hearings which really were very, very tough. Indeed, the chairman of the 9/11 Commission noted that their staff statement about what happened, what the CIA did on 9/11, was really an indictment of the agency's performance. A second factor that occurred that contributed to this momentous change of events in the fall of 2004 was really the 9/11 Commission itself. They were a group of nationally prominent men and women who were able to build a national audience through a series of hearings about what had happened on 9/11, and really they had a lot of cachet and a lot of influence. And indeed, they constructed their own strategy to be able to build a legislative proposal that would have a chance of succeeding and could be acted on very swiftly. The third factor occurring at the time was that the failure or the misassessment of Iraq WMD was coming into stark relief in the summer of 2004. The Senate Intelligence Committee's report came out and faulted groupthink, and again, the CIA was at a very low level of prestige at the time. And finally, you have to note, of course, the presence of the 9/11 Commission families, who I go through in the book became quite a powerful special interest group advocating for reform of the intelligence community, joined forces with the 9/11 Commission, and was able to have tremendous influence over the process. The last thing, and really the conventional wisdom is that we created a Director of National Intelligence and a National Counterterrorism Center that the 9/11 Commission recommended because of the presidential election of 2004. I think the conventional wisdom is a little bit wrong for the reasons I just stated. I think that the looming presidential election, in which the performance of George Bush and whether he had made the country safer were undoubtedly incredibly powerful factors that influenced the likelihood of Congress and the President to take on intelligence reform. But it's not the only factor. There was exhaustion with the CIA, and we had not one but two spectacular intelligence failures really in the same 2 to 3 year period. So what did the 9/11 Commission recommend? What they recommended was a Director of National Intelligence, really a super-empowered spy master, who would have the ability to, in an increasingly complex world of proliferators and stateless international terrorists, be able to, in the 9/11 Commission's words, we needed a quarterback. We needed someone very agile who would be able to move dollars, people, and analysts to be able to meet new threats, to be able to organize quickly to meet what they determined was perhaps a more greater intelligence or national security challenge than the Soviet Union had been. In the 9/11 Commission's estimation, the Soviet Union, while foreboding, of course, at least in an intelligence sense, there were embassies from which to recruit spies, there were armaments to look at through satellites and other particular government agencies to seek to intercept their communications, but that this wasn't the case with terrorist cells, and so we needed to be able to organize differently. On the point about there being a particular electoral impact, John Kerry, the Democratic nominee for president, endorsed the 9/11 Commission recommendations 17 minutes after the Commission recommendations were announced in July 2004. George Bush endorsed the DNI in concept 10 days later. So this speaks to the tremendous force and the incredible forces that were at play at this particular time. However, while a lot of members of Congress and the two leading individuals of each political party endorsed the 9/11 Commission's recommendations nearly immediately, it inspired tremendous bureaucratic opposition, and this is really the heart of Blinking Red. It is a tale of bureaucratic power and jockeying for influence really over the $80 billion intelligence enterprise, who would be able to control the intelligence assets of the United States. I go through the book 3 camps that were in opposition